At night, the bright moon above the head stands in the sky, and from time to time, dark clouds drift over. Outside the drifting flower edifices, after a whole day of attack, the three houses were also exhausted, leaving only a few hundred disciples to monitor, and all went back to cultivation. At this moment, there were a few cracking sounds, and a landlord, with nearly 1,000 disciples, took out the outside of the city under the cover of night. The crowd moved quickly, and before the disciples of the three houses responded, they were getting wiped out. A team of 3 or 5 disciples of drifting flower edifices silently harvested the lives of the enemy in every corner to ensure foolproof escape. At the moment, when drifting flower edifices were killing the disciples of 3 houses, one of the disciples among them suddenly pulled out a jade slip and threw it into the air. In an instant, it exploded. The landlord looked up and loudly shouted, "We have been spotted. Sisters, there is no need to hide anymore, forget everything and just attack." As soon as the word fell, nearly 1,000 disciples no longer acted in secret but instead yelled and gathered together, rushing toward the 3 camps like a tide. The 3 heads of the house hurriedly came out to inspect and directed their disciples to meet the enemy. The merry forest head, Lin Ruffing, came forward and laughed a little, then said, "That's it? These broads make a night raid with 1,000 warriors. That's not nearly enough to get us warmed up." The Pill King Hall head, Yen Bo Gong, also remarked, "True. With only some average landlords in the lead, what can they do? If you intend to attack, you should send more people. These few are completely useless. Since when did that Shruchu Bijin become senile?" Hearing them, Hell Valley head, Yuan Chan said, "And what if they have different plans? I intend to capture a landlord alive and ask her about the situation. This will be some nice and easy merit." When they hear that, they rush forward toward the battlefield to capture the landlord of the drifting flower edifices. But Yuan Chan is not in a hurry. It seems that he understood everything, and in the corner of his mouth hangs a strange arc. On the battlefield, the landlord of drifting flower edifices fighting with all her might, but suddenly Lin Ruffing arrived, and with a slam with his feet, he flew the landlord out. Then he smiled and looked at Yen Gong, who rushed to him later, and proudly said, "It looks like the credit is all mine." Yen Bagong angrily replied, "Of course it comes easy to you when you run faster than a hare. As for how much credit you get, it remains to be seen." Lin Ruffing didn't care either. He stepped forward and grabbed the woman, and said with a smile, "Merit is merit either way. Little girl, what do you want to do in the middle of the night?" Not hearing a word from her mouth, Lin Ruffing saw her stubbornness and said angrily, "You sure are tough. Let me relieve you of a hand first." But he was stopped by Yen Bagong. Yen Bagong then laughed a little and said, "House Lord Lin, this girl is a landlord. Standard interrogation won't work on her. I have with me 100 ant pills. It will feel like thousands of ant bites all over the body. Such pain and torment are worse than death. Can I give it a try?" Hearing that, Lin Ruffing murmured, "You rotten geezer, you are stealing my thunder." Then coldly said, "Fine, let's see if your 100 ant pill is as good as you say." Saying that, he pushed the woman in front of Yen Bagong. With a chuckle, Yen Bagong immediately took off the woman's veil and put a pill in her mouth. Swallowing the pill, the woman shivered violently, suddenly trembling, and fell to the ground, but twitched like a cramp. Seeing her suffering like this, an evil arc emerged in Yen Bagong's face. Then he said, "It must hurt like hell, no one can stand it more than 2 hours. If you speak early, the old man will give you the cure. Why must you be so stubborn? Talk, why are you attacking?" The woman stalked her neck, and gritted her teeth fiercely, her face twisted together, but she didn't speak. Yen Bagong was not in a hurry, just looked at her like this and faintly said, "Then help yourself to a world of hurt. Just let me know when the going gets too tough, all right? I will be waiting." Finally, half an hour later, the woman's cheeks were flushed, and finally she couldn't help it. She yelled, "Give me the antidote now. I will tell you everything." Yen Bagong raised his eyebrows proudly, then gave the woman a pill. The woman also stopped shaking immediately, breathing out, and her complexion gradually faded. Yen Bogong laughed a little and said, "Now talk. Don't think for a second that I will believe you if you say you came to capture our camp with so few people. What's your aim? Speak the truth." Looking up at the sky, the woman suddenly showed a pleasant feeling on her face, then laughed a little and replied, "It's too late, you are too late now." Hearing this, Yen Bogong loudly shouted, "What's going on? Tell me." The woman glanced at them contemptuously and said disdainfully, "I led my team here knowing full well that all we will find is death. Our mission was quite simple really. To kill the guards and fake a raid and, once discovered, stall for time. Grandma Chu and the rest have already left. You are too late in catching up." Hearing this, Yen Bogong said shockingly, "What, this was a diversion?" Saying that he slapped her and angrily said, "Damn that bitch and her schemes. That hag acted all dignified for so long, and we never thought she had sacrificed an landlord to save herself no less." What an irony lady, really made the old man know. On the other hand, Yuan Shan still hung with the content of self-satisfaction and murmured secretly, "You two losers, you will suffer slowly." In a dark valley, Grandma Chu took a group of women and took a break by the stream in the valley. A disciple of Huayu Tower presented in front of her with a bowl of clear streams and said happily, "Grandmother, here's some water." Grandma patted her little head and nodded slightly. There was a deep sorrow flashing in her eyes. She then sighed and said, "Last night after we broke out in 5 different directions, I heard a noise from Gelder Rose's side. I am afraid we have been discovered. For the sake of our journey to safety, they drew the enemy and must have died by now. I have let them down." Du Dan came forward and worriedly said, "Don't say that, grandmother. Overseer Gelder Rose is like all of us, willing to lay down their life for drifting flower edifices. She would never blame you." Suddenly, a broken air sounded, and Qin Kai Ching appeared in front of everyone. She then remarked, "Grandmother, it's not good, the road ahead has been sealed, and they are now searching for us on their way over here." The body couldn't help but shivered, and her grandmother's face was amazed. She worriedly asked, "What? Did they foresee our plan to escape? How is this possible? And who is coming after us?" After pondering for a while, Qin Kai Ching respectfully said, "Grandmother, their group is made of youths, led by Hell Valley's Grand Elder and Fifth Elder." Shaking her head blankly, Grandma then remarked, "Did Hell Valley guess our attempt to flee? Ever since Ugiki died, they have never had such guile." Saying all that, Grandma Chu's stick fell, and she worriedly said again, "We have lost now. I have been far-sighted all my life only to make mistakes over and over at the end, ruining Drifting Flowers Edifice's legacy. I am ashamed to meet my ancestors in the underworld." At this moment, behind a small hill in the distance, a team of audible footsteps came. Everyone was shocked, and they dared not to speak. On the other hand, thousands of disciples of Hell Valley are doing a rug-like search to this place where Grandma Chu was hiding. Grand Elder of Hell Valley remarked, "Yu Ming, you have grown so much in skill over the years. I still can't believe that old hag would leave the city and its defenses and make for such a daring attempt. We never would have had such an easy time trapping so many of them if it were not for you. I wonder how much merit will this get us?" Fifth Elder also nodded anxiously and said while laughing, "Yu Ming is turning out to resemble the Seventh Elder more and more." Shaking his head slowly, Yu Ming looked calm and remarked, "No, I do not want to become my master. I want to surpass him." Then asked, "Grand Elder, has grandmother been caught?" Grand Elder shook his head slightly and replied, "In their attempt to flee, we have captured 4 teams, but neither has that old hag among them." Suddenly, Yu Ming raised his hand and made everyone stop, looked at the hill in front, and murmured, "Wait here while I look ahead." Hearing this, the Fifth Elder remarked, "Yu Ming, why is it that you always go ahead? Are you trying to take all the credit?" Yu Ming replied, "Fifth Elder, I am only an advisor. How can I take down thousands of people by myself and steal your credit? I only want to check for signs of them passing through here and their direction. With all of us going ahead, it will mask all the clues." As soon as Yoming's words fell, the Grand Elder stared at Fifth Elder and said, "Old Fifth, you are so petty. Yuming earned the most merit in the first place with his plan. Why would he steal ours then?" The Fifth Elder shook his head and laughed, saying, "I was just fooling around. Don't worry about it, Yuming." Yuming also nodded slightly, smiled lightly, and then flew to the top of one of the tallest trees. But when he looked down at the opposite side, his pupils couldn't help but shiver fiercely. The grandma and others who were hiding there were also tight in their hearts, their fists suddenly squeezed, and a strong fighting intention flashed in their eyes. Then Grandma remarked to all her disciples, "Now that we have been discovered, let's fight to the death." However, before they even started to move, Yuming hurriedly made a silent gesture to them and then slowly shook his head. Seeing that, everyone couldn't help being surprised. All of them were unclear. But soon, Yuming turned around and looked at the elders of the Hell Valley from the other side, and shouted, "Drifting Flowers Edifice's team passed through here. They must have gone in that direction. You might catch them if you give chase." Listening to Yuming, Grand Elder laughed and said, "Fifth Elder, let's go." Seeing this, Grandma Chu and her disciples couldn't help but stunned. They all stared closely at Yoming's back. They really can't figure it out. How could someone from the Hell Valley secretly help them? After the Hell Valley elders disappeared, Yuming turned around and looked at Grandmother and said, "Everyone from Drifting Flowers Edifices, east and west, are blocked. Only north and south have been searched already and there's no one there. But I highly recommend going in the south direction. In those tall mountains and dense forests, it's easy to hide." Hearing that, Grandma Chu called him aloud and asked, "Why did you save us?" Looking back at them strangely, Yuming smiled disdainfully and replied, "Save you? You think too much. It's never worth betraying my house over some strays. Just send this message to Shuafan. He owes me one." On the way to the Hell Valley elders, Yuming shook his head with a wry smile and murmured, "I couldn't help but wonder, who will be my lord in the end?" Grandma and her disciples, on the other hand, were wading in the mountains and through the water, eventually breaking free from the Regent Estate's encirclement. But they just happened to meet the people who came to meet them, and it was none other than the Luo family. Chiu Yanhai clenched his fists and said loudly, "Grandma Chu, Steward Zhou has had us waiting for you here for ages." Grandma Chu bowed as she heard this and exclaimed, "So it's you too. It's good to see you in this hour of dire need." Xueqing also said, "Our houses are allies after all. It's only natural to help." Chiu Yanhai laughed a little and asked, "Grandmother, there is something I don't understand. We have clearly given you ample warning about Regent Estate assault, yet why were you so passive?" Hearing that, Grandma Chu anxiously replied, "To be honest, I have been in seclusion for so long and the information was left to the others. They were too shallow in their thinking and didn't take it seriously that the Regent Estate would attack. When I came out, I was beset with enemies at the gates, and it was already too late. I am truly ashamed." Chiu Yanhai said after listening to her, "So that's the case." He then looked at Xueqing, and they both smiled quietly, knowing that they were trapped in Zhou Fan's plan. Du Dan came forward and angrily shouted, "Since you knew about the attack on us for so long, why did not you come help earlier? Were you waiting for us to be destroyed before acting? What kind of an ally are you?" Hearing that, Chiu Yanhai made a cold face and replied, "Girly, we would not be here in the first place, otherwise." However, before he finished his words, Grandma Chu anxiously said, "Elder Chiu, please calm down. Peony is just so brash. Please don't mind her." Then she turned and looked at Du Dan and shouted, "Peony, Elder Chiu has come from afar to help us, so the least you could do is show some consideration. How can you insult them like this? Apologize to him now." But Du Dan didn't care. She held her head high and coldly said, "Screw apologies. If their rescue is real, why are there so few of them, and without even Shuafan?" They have no intention to help us, clearly. Hearing that, Chiu Yanhai said coldly, ignorant lass. What do a bunch of thoughtless broads like you know about Steward Zhou's intricate planning? When he received your plea for help, Steward Zhou knew you had never looked at him the same way for taking your Bodhi route or believed his messages. Steward Zhou even warned us not to say this, or it would break the ties between the houses. But you have given me no choice. Du Dan again shouted, saying, does that give him the right to steal our precious treasure? Grandma looked at Du Dan and stopped her, saying, Peony, shut up. Hearing that, Chiu Yanhai lost control of his rage and coldly stated, little girl, if it hadn't been for Steward Zhou, for this gross lack of respect, I would have snapped your neck. As he says this, his body is engulfed in flames. Seeing this, Grandma Chu lifted her hand and stopped Du Dan, afraid that something would happen to her if she spoke any further. Shui Qing also approached, laughed briefly, and stopped Chiu Yanhai, saying, we're all on the same side. Why do we have to argue? Right, grandmother? Grandma Chu laughed anxiously and replied, yes, Elder Shui is totally right. Elder Chiu, forgive me. I have failed to teach her properly. It's all my fault and I ask that Elder Chiu restrain his anger. Shui Qing laughed a little, then looked at Chiu Yanhai and said, big lug, they have already apologized. Show some consideration. Seeing Chiu Yanhai still not flinching, Shui Qing angrily kicked him and said again, you have grown up. Don't you listen to me? I am asking you to show some consideration. Chiu Yanhai then sighed and said, it's fine. I am not so petty. Seeing that, Grandma Chu thought, the savage Elder Chiu is whipped, that explains it because Shui Qing is around. Following that, Grandma Chu and Shui Qing both bowed to each other. Shui Qing then stated, don't worry about him, his temper is always on fire. It comes and goes just as fast. As for the Bodhi root, Steward Zhou forbade us from mentioning it. You will have to ask him when you meet. Grandma Chu bowed again and said, I would not dare to ask. Shui Qing continued, also, after hearing her plea for help, Steward Zhou split his forces. While we were here as relief, he led an attack on Pil King Hall. Hearing that, Du Dan shockingly asked, Pil King Hall? What is he doing there? Grandma Chu was also shocked to find that Zhuo Fan was attacking Pil King Hall. Then Chiu Yanhai remarked, that's why I called you ignorant. Steward Zhou, with his boundless wisdom, was aware of your siege and considering how he could help. He foresaw the Sword Marquis's abode and Veiled Dragon Pavilion coming to help but getting pushed back with heavy losses. You thought Steward Zhou would lead his own people into a trap? He then laughed and continued, to tell you the truth. Steward Zhou is attacking Pil King Hall to get them to fall back. Reports on the attack on Pil King Hall should be coming in right about now. Getting Regent Estate and the rest to come to its rescue. Wouldn't that relieve your city of the siege? We would then come in with our thousands of troops and coordinate with you in destroying them. A shame you couldn't even last that long. Hearing all that, Grandma Chu was shocked and murmured, blast it. We got out too soon. I should have trusted Zhuo Fan. I should have trusted him to come to us. We should have waited a few more days. Then the relief would have come, and drifting flower edifices could have been saved. Seeing Grandma Chu in astonishment, Shui Qing grinned a little and thought, drifting flower edifices, they almost got played to death, tossed between Steward Zhou and the Regent Estate. But this is sure to guarantee their change of heart. In a magnificent courtyard, the Regent Estate celebrates with wine and feasts. Huang Pu Tianyuan laughingly said, Valley Lord Yu has his men capture the drifting flowers edifices runways, and have earned great merit. A toast to Valley Lord Yu. Yu Wanshan did not dare to be indifferent and quickly got up and humbly said, Estate Lord, you are too kind. It was my duty to do this. After hearing that, Yan Bagong and Lin Ruffing gazed at Yu Wanshan as if they were about to devour him and became extremely envious and thought, hypocrite, this guy took use of our attack on the arrays to catch those women. It is really insidious. Leng Wuchan, who is sitting beside Huang Pu Tianyuan, then asked, Valley Lord Yu. Impressive move they're capturing drifting flower edifices women's. Only, how exactly did you know what they were going to do? Yu Wanchan smiled lightly and replied, Sir Lung, the success is not all mine, but the credit falls on my capable assistant. He is Hell Valley new advisor, Yu Ming, the last disciple of the late Yu Giki. Hearing that, Ling Wuchan laughed a little and said, I see now why Hell Valley has moved with purpose and precision as of late. You have an advisor now. Heroes always come young. Then he looked toward Yu Ming and asked, Sir Yu Ming, by your guess, where do you think the fleeing drifting flower edifices women turn to? Yu Ming shook his head and replied, To be honest, I don't know. However, knowing how stubborn grandmother is, and going by her name as Lady of Steel, she is not one to give up. Sooner or later this day was bound to come and she planned accordingly. I just never imagined she would be so bold as to break the siege while they still had some fight left in them. Capturing so many of her disciples was just a happy coincidence. Although it is regrettable that grandmother and the landlord got away. When Yen Bagong and Lin Ruffing heard that, they bit their teeth and mumbled, Damn it, this punk is just like Yuan Shan. Taking pride and acting humble. Hearing all this, Ling Wuchang smiled faintly, waved his hand and praised, Sir Yu Ming is so modest. How can it be a mistake when you have gained such merit? Huang Pu Tianyuan also nodded slightly and smiled agreeing, Yu Ming, you truly take after your master. Hell Valley will go far with you by their side. Yu Ming then bowed and replied, Estate Lord is too kind. Seeing this, Yu Wanshan also grinned and looked proudly at Yu Ming. At that time, Yen Bagong also said while making a cold face, What future can a house with a robbed home ever have? Hearing this, Yu Wanshan immediately turned angry and stared at him fiercely and remarked, What did you say? However, at this moment, a disciple of Pil King Hall came running toward Yen Bagong and whispered something in his ear. Hearing that, Yen Bagong couldn't control himself and hurriedly rushed to the room. Kneeling down to Huang Pu Tianyuan, he said worriedly, Estate Lord Huang Pu, I beg of you, rescue Pil King Hall. Huang Pu Tianyuan raised his palms in vain and shouted, What on earth has happened, Hall Lord Yen? Get up and tell me. Sobbing again, Yen Bagong anxiously said, Zhou Fan is laying waste to Pil King Hall. My house legacy is about to be turned to dust, Estate Lord, kindly help me. Hearing this, everyone was shocked at the scene. It is just that Huang Pu Tianyuan and Lung Wuchang were under a shocked look, but there was a hint of smile in their eyes. Yu Wanshan also laughed a little and said, Talk about righteous retribution. Hearing this, Yen Bagong's eyes were red, staring at him closely, but he couldn't say a word. He again looked at Huang Pu Tianyuan and anxiously said, Estate Lord Huang Pu, you must help me. The entire Pil King Hall will be eternally grateful. Hearing this, Ling Wuchang sighed and said, Zhou Fan is too vile and insidious. Going in without a plan will set us up for disaster, falling for his devious ploy. To the best of my knowledge, we should instead attack his allies to force him away. We will attack Veiled Dragon Pavilion and that will make him come to their rescue. Won't that relieve Pil King Hall? Yu Ming on the other hand, already seen through the plans of both parties, he couldn't stop mourning under his heart, now this is an overt plot. Each side has their own mastermind acting as coordinator and the houses are the fodder. Be it an ally or an enemy, all of you will end up getting chewed and spit out. Zhuge Changfeng, Zhou Fan, Ling Wuchang and the Emperor, all are true experts. On the other hand, after more than 2 months of rapid journey, Xueqing finally escorted the drifting flower edifices outside Huayu City. And there, Zhou Fan, who got the news, has been waiting for a long time. Seeing Grandma Chu in front, Zhou Fan remarked, Grandmother, as I live and breathe, I welcome you. Hearing this, Grandma Chu bowed and said, I thank you, Steward Zhou, for the assistance in Drifting Flower Edifice's hour of need and for taking the time to come see us in person. I can't say how honored I am. Zhou Fan took a deep breath and said, How can you say that, Grandmother? We are all allies, of course, I would help you. It must be that grandmother must still be hurting for what I did back then. Saying that, he made a sad face and continued, it's all my fault for betraying your trust and for your suffering now. Grandma looked at Zhou Fan's sad face and felt more guilty in her heart for suspecting him. However, Du Dan came forward and loudly shouted, Ta Fan, why did you steal our heirloom? Hearing this, Grandma glared at her fiercely and scolded her. Zhou Fan waved his hand and said lightly, I admit, it was wrong stealing from you. I have no excuse. For that, I have let everyone down when you needed me the most. I did not wish for this to happen. At this moment, Xueqing seemed to be a little uncomfortable and interjected, there is no need for excuses, Steward Zhou. You have done nothing wrong. Did you know that Regent Estate had young Miss and young Master in their clutches, forcing Steward Zhou to commit such a vile act? What would you have done, grandmother, if this kind of situation is in front of you? But before she could say any more, Zhou Fan interrupted her saying, Elder Shui, you are going out of line. Hearing this, Grandma Chu angrily said, so it's all because of those bastards from Regent Estate. That devious Regent Estate, and Lung Wuchang, that snake. Zhou Fan then sighed and said, grandmother need not to say that. They are not that vile, it was me who betrayed you despite our ties. It's all on me. The only one you can take it out on is also me. A man has to do what a man must. I can take it all the blame. Hearing this, Grandma Chu anxiously said, oh, no, Steward Zhou, I am not so unwise as to take it out on you. Elder Shui is right, anyone would have done it if it were them, including me. It's not within my right to judge you, Steward Zhou. Saying this, she gritted her teeth and cursed the Regent Estate, saying, that wretched and vile and degenerate Regent Estate wanted to incite discord among us. Lung Wuchang is even worse. I bet he came up with that despicable plan. He stands back while the Regent Estate is put to work, forcing you into driving a wedge between us. Alas, I did fall for their ploy, doubting the Luo clan and resulting in today's calamity. This is all my fault. While Grandma Chu saying all this, Zhou Fan inwardly thought, only I, Zhou Fan, am capable of stealing their treasure. However, since grandmother insists that it's a trick of the Regent Estate, I will let Sir Ling take the blame. Thinking of this, Zhou Fan couldn't help persuaded Grandma Chu saying, grandmother, now you know that it was all a trick. We must now stand more united than ever, to have nothing come between us again. Grandma nodded fixedly, her eyes flashed, then she said, yes, Steward Zhou, Drifting Flower Edifices is now at its weakest and we will do everything you ask of us, for vengeance and rebuilding Drifting Flower Edifices. Hearing this, Zhou Fan smiled and said lightly, you honor me with your deep sense of duty. I will never let you down. By the way, I noticed you were poisoned with the rainbow cloud palm. You better go into the city and rest, I will have someone prepare an antidote for you. Once again Grandma Chu bowed and thanked Zhou Fan, then walked into the city with the help of the rest of the disciples. Zhou Fan stood on the spot and watched her leave. After Drifting Flower Edifice leaves, Xueqing remarked, well, I will be honest. Steward Zhou, you sure know how to turn excuses into a high-class act. We could have just told them when we first met. Why drag it all out until now? I felt my ears explode hearing that peony nag all the way. With a chuckle, Zhou Fan looked in the direction of the disappearance of everyone, then sighed and explained, Elder Shui, did you know the difference between fetching and sending? Unconsciously, Xueqing shook her head blankly. Zhou Fan continues, when someone gives you something, you don't give it much value. If you had used the same excuse from the start, no matter how good, they still wouldn't believe you. Only through their constant inquiry, forcing me to say it, did they take it as truth. Drifting Flower Edifices are in ruins and my helping hand will be seen as God sent. Now that all doubts are cleared as well, they will trust no one more than me. The trust will also affect the incoming houses as well, making the reform of the 3 houses a done deal. By the way, Elder Shui, Regent Estate must be gunning for Veiled Dragon Pavilion and Sword Marquis' abode now. Send them a word. Urge them to leave their homes and come to Luo Clan. Homeless they will only have us to rely on in the end. Xueqing nodded and replied, I will do that, Steward Zhou. Then she looked at Zhou Fan and doubtfully asked, Steward Zhou, what is her age again? Why do you look more and more like a sly old fox? Human yet vile at the same time, you still got the 3 destitute houses moved to tears from your generosity. Slowly shaking his head, Zhou Fan chuckled unconsciously and said, It's not me who made them homeless, but society. The signs of conflict and chaos have appeared, and I can't stop it. All I can do is stave off the anarchy at my gates. Elder Shui, you will learn in due time. What I have in store for them is for their own good. While I want them integrated and re-educated, everyone else would have them purged. Xueqing didn't know, so she nodded dumbly and thought, You are telling me it's common sense to thank the guy for wrecking your 1,000-year-old legacy? The vile and deceitful Steward Zhou sure acts quite a nobleman. Zhou Fan then smiled a little and asked, How is it going on Elder Chiu end? Xueqing replied, As per your orders, I escorted Drifting Flower Edifice's disciples while the old guy is waiting for Regent Estate to vacate their city, before they will desecrate Drifting Flower's Edifice's ancestors and fetch you those bodies. Hearing this, Zhou Fan laughed coldly, full of satisfaction. Then he turned and flew in the direction of Haifeng Mountain, saying, Elder Li and Elder Yan have gone to take care of Pil King Hall. Wait for Elder Chiu to return and you two can go deal with Mary Woods. Xueqing nodded and bowed, then said, I will do that. Soon, Zhou Fan came to the Cave of Troops again, waved his hand, and let the Luo family disciples and Yun family members who were being arranged here leave. Entering the cave, he thought, This cave is finally ready. The big pit before was too eye-catching. Looking around, there are rows and rows of dirt pits there, showing a pattern of yin and yang tai chi. Each earth pit is covered with spirit stones, and there are 2 bodies in the middle. Zhou Fan looked up and said loudly, Around 10 years ago, I had Captain Peng train you. But you failed and turned cripple. I had Miss Lei teach you myriad breaths, while she called me a cruel monster, knowing what I did. But I believe letting you live your lives as cripples was the ultimate cruelty. That's why I told her that even if you live a life worse than death, I had still have use of you. Saying that, he slowly leaned down and touched one of the corpse's head and continued saying, That time has come. You won't be the strongest, but will reach your peak all based on your talent. You will make the Empire see that you are no cripples, but great warriors. While Zhou Fan was shouting all that, a sudden fluctuations emanated from the dead body. He then laughed a little and said, What's with the can I move questions? You will do more than that after this. More than your wildest dreams. You will become the Luo clan's strongest guards, Luo clan pride and honor. Originally, he wanted to refine war puppets, a terrible humanoid weapon, based on the corpses of the strong men of past dynasties. With a cold smile, Zhou Fan's eyes flashed with a strange light and the tactics in his hand flicked, and he shouted, Open the gates of the world and let the clouds simmer, bringing down the heavy dark rain of war. So that the souls of the ancient may trample down on this land once more. Saying that, he put his fingers towards the sky and a purple lightning appeared. All this lightning turned into electric snakes, stalking in the corpse. After that, Zhou Fan laughed with his devilish smile and said, Old Emperor, I am afraid you won't be able to sit on the dragon chair for long.